True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffindaffer. Boy, do we have a lot to cover. I was hoping to have a double live, one on Bryan Kohberger, the Idaho 4 case, followed up by a live regarding Sebastian Rogers. A lot to get into there as well. But then I realized I didn't think it would serve either case well. Also, I'm looking for a very special guest to join us on the Sebastian Rogers case. And I am really hoping that he is going to be available tomorrow at 5. So I have it scheduled tomorrow at 5. The only thing that could possibly change that is if I can't get him. And even then, I might not change him because I think it's really important to go on just to talk about a few things going on with that case. I want to break right into Bryan Kohberger. We know that there's been a lot of documents that have been dropped that we're seeing for the first time. Remember, a lot of these really relate to documents from 2 years ago, but we were never able to see what was gleaned from those documents, what was obtained, in some cases, what was even sought in those documents because of the very, very strict, not only gag order, but also document parameters and everything being sealed. And this new judge has said, no, forget that. We're really going to fall in line with the normal parameters of being able to seal up documents. Again, we live in a country where the whole idea is supposed to be transparency on these cases. The public is supposed to get to witness cases. If you're accused, you're supposed to see all the evidence against you. I mean, we have very important rules for a very important reason, and that is, I have this stray hair, and that is that we don't ever want to see somebody innocent ever be convicted. We err toward the side of never having that happen. And so that's what makes it so tough on the prosecution to prove these cases oftentimes and to get everything put together. But we're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger. All right, this document that came down has 60 different line items. I know you might be watching either Twitter or mainstream media, YouTubers, wherever you might get your news. I don't know if anybody has really broken down all these line items. They've sort of taken what they've thought was interesting and run with those one or two items. We're going to go through each one and some in detail, some in not detail because it's not necessary. But I want you all to understand really what the evidence is against Bryan Kohberger beyond what everybody's talked about, right? It's mounting, and it's really clear to me that they've hired, meaning the prosecution has hired amazing experts, and that they have made sure they've gone through video in that area with a fine-tooth comb, financial records. They have really built a strong tertiary case, meaning I'm not talking about the DNA on the thumb snap. I'm not even talking about the digital on and off or the visualization of Dylan Mortensen seeing a man fitting Bryan Kohberger's general physical description in terms of height and weight and what he wore and the bushy eyebrows. I'm talking about all the evidence that's going to support that. I've always said the DNA will hang Bryan Kohberger, or maybe I should say now, possibly get him shot, because that is the form of death penalty punishment that they have there now. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, just kind of making the analogy that that DNA is going to be what hangs him, but the rope that is going to be used is the digital evidence. So that's just how strongly I believe the digital evidence. Again, I want to also preface everything I say, just like I do in every video. Look, these individuals are innocent in a court of law. What we do here is we specifically discuss facts, and I break them down just from a law enforcement perspective. So let's get after it. All right. Number one on this new document is specifically Linda Lane surveillance footage. And both the 1320 and the 13 Linda Lane footage is going to be used. And I want to tell you the time frame. So it's 3:29 at the 1320 Linda Lane, and at the 1330 Linda Lane is the 3:30 in the morning to 4:07. And this is showing the suspect vehicle. You know, we've been going over this vehicle surveillance for 2 years, you know, the Linda Lane, we've talked about all of this different coverage. We've shown it, we've detailed it, but now we know the government is going to use it. And indeed, it is legitimate. They've legitimized it now with showing us what they've decided to use. And now we even have the exact time frame that this is occurring in. I want to say I am going through this list, specifically how the motion went through it. It's not chronological, unfortunately. I am anal retentive in that regard. If I were, which typically the agents work on these motions, the prosecutors put together the law and tell you what they need, but I would not doubt at all that an agent actually sort of put together this list, certainly helped put together this list. I would have said, okay, guys, we've got to have this chronological. This just isn't making sense. But nevertheless, it's not chronological, but it does make a lot of sense. And it really lines out the specificity of the timeline that the prosecution is going to have to show their case. There's not going to be many gaps at all. I also want to say this, and this is something that in my experience is quite unique, both on the expert witness side of things, as in other words, looking at tens of thousands of documents in those cases, the lion's share of the work I do involve a homicide. I am just really surprised at some of these motions I'm seeing, like this one, where it's basically saying, hey, defense, this is what you're getting. This is what we're serving up. This is what the table is being set with. And that's a little unusual. I just wanted to point that out, that normally you don't give the defense literally exactly how you plan to use your evidence. Out of all of these terabytes, they are narrowing it down. They're telling the defense, listen, this is going to prove this, to the specificity of time, to the specificity of people, to what it all means. Normally, we don't do that. It's just like, here are the boxes, here's the information, you look through it, you see what's important for you, we'll see what's important for us, and then let's go to war in the courtroom, battle in the courtroom. So I'm a little bit surprised, but I keep wondering if the prosecution isn't dangling the carrot a little bit. Are they kind of saying, listen, we have such a rock solid case. Look, you need to plea out your client, and maybe we can consider removing the death penalty. That's the only reasoning I can get out of this. I haven't seen an order, and if any of you have, please put it in the comments. I haven't seen an order where the judge has mandated this. In other words, prosecution, I want everything spelled out to the T. We're not going to make the defense look through all those terabytes of information. And the reason that that is a bad idea, in my opinion, not just to come from the judge, but to come from a prosecutor, what a prosecutor might see as good evidence, a defense attorney might see as exculpatory. So in my experience, and always my view on discovery, you have to give the defense every morsel, everything, whether you think it's important or not. We saw this in Delphi, where they've withheld so much information. It just makes me nauseated because I think it's so wrong, because the defense has to have a chance to use whatever they might glean from a huge amount of information to figure out what might work for them. All right, I digress. I'm getting back on these now. Okay, those are the first two items. The next item is, and I wanted you guys to keep in mind, not digressing again, but keep in mind that that selfie was made at 10:31 a.m. So when we discuss all these times and this flow of time, I just find it interesting to think, wow, this happened then, this happened then. And then, of course, the selfie at 10:31. At 12:46 p.m. that day, so after the murders to 1:06, they are going to be using information specifically from videos related to that time frame. So it's very clear to me that the prosecution just is not going for what happened before this crime and during where the car was. They want to know, and they want to make it very clear to the jury what Bryan Kohberger was doing after these crimes were committed. Where was that vehicle? And I think more importantly, it's to tie him to that vehicle, not so that nobody could say, well, was there another, 2013, 14, 15, his the 15 Elantra that looked close that could have possibly did this? No, this Elantra was the same Elantra that he was in when he left Pullman, the same during the murders, then the same traveling all around throughout Idaho, throughout Washington. It's the same vehicle and it's that same driver. That's what they're getting at, I think, with pulling a lot of what he did afterwards, kind of bringing it all together as being him. The most important thing that a lot of people pointed out, we've already talked about it, we've spent a whole segment on it, is the Amazon click and search history, specifically from January 5 of 2020 through to December 13 of 2022. That's what they're going to be using. This is why I think this is important. And people get so hooked up on, the knife, which is perfect, right? Now we have the K-bar knife used in the murders and the sheath connected to him. And I know I shouldn't be that specific because I'm saying there were other knife sheaths purchased that would have been that knife sheath, but we know that particular model was purchased by Bryan Kohberger and the corresponding knife that sheath that fits in that sheath. So this is important. Even though we don't have the murder weapon, we have the link to the person that they're saying committed this crime and the murder weapon. But I think what's also interesting, that's the big nugget. What's the smaller nugget is this huge time frame. And I can tell you that they're not going to put in January 5, 2022 through December of 2022, exact date again, 13th, if they don't have important information throughout that time frame. So I'm going to be very interested to see what happened all throughout January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, all these months. What was in that click and Amazon history that we haven't heard about yet? I can tell you, not only from these documents, but going through a trial, you want to pare down your order of proof, which is your witnesses and your exhibits, what you plan to present and bring somebody to trial. You need to pare that down to the necessities. You don't want the extraneous. And we sort of saw that a bit in the Karen Read trial. Speaking of Karen Read, I am not wearing pink for Karen Read. When I talk about Karen Read, I try to always wear blue or a neutral color because I don't want anyone to think in any way, shape, or form that I am FKR. Is that right? FKR, that I am anyway supporting her outlandish presentation, position, and falsehoods that a huge conspiracy took place and she did nothing. And, I don't support any of that. And, but I love the color pink. It's going into spring, and it's really one of my favorite colors to wear. And so anyway, I'm wearing pink, feeling very happy in this springy mood, and I kind of dress how I feel that day typically. All right, just wanted to get that off the board. I came out of the room and my husband said, "Oh, you're wearing a Karen Read? Are you talking about Karen Read?" I'm like, "Absolutely not, honey." He said, "Thank goodness." He sees right through her as well. All right. Purchase history. Next are the AT&T records. Now, specifically, they're going to have on AT&T records from 11, 12, 13, and 14 for BK, Bryan Kohberger, Xana Coronado, and Maddie Mogen. Okay, so That's that string. And then for Bryan Kohberger, they're going to have 6/23/22 through 12/22. Again, I find that interesting. What's going on that they feel like they're going to need to introduce these months and months of records? So I think it's going to be very important. I'm glad they put these dates, because if I'm a defense attorney, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they're not just going to focus like this because that's their evidence. They've got evidence out to here that they're going to need to discuss. And so I think that's very important. All right. Moving on. I want to talk about, so they have Nicholas Balance that is going to be one of their experts. And I have to say, their other expert, who is, sorry, I want to make sure I get his name right, Michael Douglas, who is going to be their forensic financial analyst. Listen, these guys are picking the best of the best. There is no doubt they have not spared any expense, nor have they pulled out of the expert air for these guys. They are getting the best there is in their fields, the top people, top 10, top 15 people of experts in this arena. And I'm going to tell you why I think this is so important that they're doing this. It's not to pile on or anything like this. Listen, and what reminded me of this is Dr. Gary Piccata, who I've interviewed in, actually, I think I interviewed him in my second or third ever video, like full length video. It's still only probably an hour long. But I did videos early on instead of just lives. And I'm going to try to get back to doing a video a month soon, because I really want to spend time with these experts and have it be really professional and polished with pictures like I started. And but we talked a lot about Bryan Kohberger. And there was something he said, I actually posted it on Twitter because it really, really makes you think. And this is words to this effect. It's very important that this jury realize that if through some snafu, if through some egregious error, if through some reason Bryan Kohberger is not found guilty, the person that would be going back on the streets, what do you say? They have the personality, I think is how he wrote it, of a serial killer. And this is a huge onus on the prosecution. First of all, it's always a huge onus on the prosecution because, again, you never want to convict or, put a case together against somebody you believe is innocent. No prosecutor does that, and no FBI agent and no police officer does that. I shouldn't say no, because there are corrupt people like Matthew Farwell in the Sandra Birchmore case, but I am just saying 99% of law enforcement, they are not picking somebody out of the air. They are on the stand and they are before grand juries and they're producing information, presenting information and evidence based on what they have gleaned from their investigation. And no one other than I don't even know if I want to say 1%, but the small percentage that are bad eggs would ever want to see a miscarriage of justice. So I just wanted to make that clear, that there's a huge onus on the prosecution, first of all, not to try to convict anybody that's innocent. But second of all, once they believe the evidence shows they're guilty, they better slam dunk it. Because if they don't, look at the risk that they're putting society in, especially in a case like this, especially in a case like BTK, Dennis Rader, especially in Dahmer. These people are dangerous. And so I am glad that the prosecution team has spared no expense and have gone to the best of the best to put this case together properly. All right, I better buzz along because I'm only on like number 13. Okay, the bagel shop. There is evidence on that video between 1:40 a.m. and 2 a.m. Regarding Kaylee and Maddie. So again, when they're putting together this story, it's all intertwined. On my Twitter once, I put up maps of exactly where Bryan Kohberger was from the beginning of this conspiracy to the end, based on the probable cause affidavit and all it lined out in video information provided there. Well, now we have even more pinpoint information, but they don't only have to pinpoint Bryan Kohberger. They have to pinpoint Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Bethany Funk, Dylan Mortensen. They are going to want there to be no question in the jurors' minds where these important entities were, not just Kohberger. All right, so they're going to be doing that. Also, they're going to be introducing Bank of America evidence, I believe, regarding Bethany Funk and Xana Kernodle. I believe that's going to have to do with different ordering, possibly her DoorDash. And I need to double look back there. I didn't put a big no on this one. I'm going to circle back to that because I'm going to go to my phone in a minute. I want to circle back because I think they might have decided not to use that evidence, even though they have it. All right. Banner Bank, they've decided not to use that. The video from Cafe Artista from 1:40 a.m. with Kaylee Gonsalves and Maddie Mogen, they are going to use that. The Corner Club, again, this is so specific, from 10:20 p.m. until 1:37 a.m. that next morning. They are going to be using that to show exactly where Maddie and Kaylee were. They're going to show probably how many drinks they had, what they did in there, who they consorted with. And all of that's important because, again, that was something they would have originally looked at to see if anybody followed them from there, if anybody that could have been in that corner club could have been responsible for this crime. So it's important that all of these details come out so that there's no question as to their evidence and what they believe it tells in terms of Bryan Kohberger's action. Costco, 11:59. They're going to show, so that's 11:59 the next day, again, about an hour after he takes that selfie. They have Costco video, so it's going to again show Bryan Kohberger and his movements. All right. The sales student records. All right. I've got a huge star here. I want to continue through this timeline, or not timeline, but this the evidence that's in this motion. But we're going to come back to this because this is big news, in my opinion, because Bryan Kohberger does a 12-page document for his final that he submits on crime scenes investigations. I thought it was interesting. We don't really know. I read the document. We don't really know whether this is just his hypothetical crime scene or whether he's taking it from a case. I don't think it matters for what he was doing for his report. But guess what he chose? He chose a stabbing. Not gunfire, not a brutal beating, no bludgeoning with the candlestick in the study. He chose somebody massacred with a knife. Okay, that's interesting. But what's really interesting is the 12 pages. And we're going to go over some highlights. I'm not going to read that in totality, but I first of all want to say, without digressing too much before we get back to this, excellent paper. If he didn't get an A on this, I will be shocked. His writing skills, and hopefully none of you judge my writing from Twitter, because this is me on Twitter. You know, I'm working on something, doing something. I'm like, oh, God, I think I'll tweet about this. Okay, boom. Okay, I might answer this, boom. And then I move on. oftentimes don't use punctuation. I don't do my spell check. I am just strictly trying to get an idea out there. I write enough that has to go through the court process and legal review that I love Twitter because it's my happy place just to throw out hopefully ideas and thoughts and also read what all of you have to say. So anyway, but I could tell you, Bryan Kohberger is very well written, but not only because his grammar was good. I loved how he organized. He organizes like I love to organize, meaning you state something, and you'll see this even when I am on Twitter. I love to bullet point because that's what I want to read. I don't want to read a narrative. If you can say he showed up to the crime scene with, a knife, balaclava, scissors, a razor, whatever, a rope, all these things. I just want to see this. I don't want to see a big, long narrative. That's how he writes. It's so great. It's how we in law enforcement like to bullet point. And then he even bullet points his bullet points, which I always do too. Even when I write expert papers, I literally will bullet point and then bullet point under the bullet point. For instance, K-bar knife, the make, the model, the year, when it was purchased, so that anybody reading it can say, oh, these are the important points about that K-bar knife. That's how he writes. It's so succinct. It's so organized. Really well done. But let's go beyond that. Just because his style of writing and my style match, that doesn't make him some great writer. It might make us both bad writers, but I really appreciated it. Secondarily, what I really love about his writing style about his writing is he was so comprehensive. He didn't leave any detail out. When he discusses a crime scene and how to process it and the steps you have to take, I literally was looking for a mistake. I was looking for, oh, he'll definitely leave it. Oh, no, he's never going to remember. Oh, there's no way he'll know about this. He knew about it. I had trouble finding any sort of egregious error. And in fact, it was so well done and comprehensive. That tells me a lot. It tells me why, even though a lot of people are saying he was stupid, remember, but for that DNA, I honestly don't know when or if he would have been caught. And I say that so sincerely. I'd like to think they would have been able to, take that fuzzy video and somehow link it. I know he was on one of their lists because they knew they had Elantras, 11 through 13, expanded later, 11 through 16, I believe. His was 15. All those thousands of Elantras. And then, of course, narrowing it down to his. I know he was on the list because he was only 8 miles away. People think it's further away than that. It was 8 miles between Pullman and Moscow. So would he have been found? Yeah, probably. Would they have been able to make the case they have now? I mean, even with DNA, there's people saying the case isn't good. I mean, I always show that GIF of a girl with brown hair, like bamming her head against a brick wall, because this is really a strong case. And it's just getting stronger by the minute. All right, I'm digressing. Let me move on. All right, Costco to sales. Okay, Dick's. The Dick's receipt showed the balaclava. I mentioned this and there wasn't much of a response. I was really surprised. Maybe everybody knows this, but SWAT operators, we all had balaclava. Not baklava like you eat. Balaclava. It's balaclava. And it is a mask that goes up like this and around your face. So it's not like a ski mask. It's more like a rounded shape, black, and you have it. So we all obviously have ballistic helmets that cover us, all down like this. So if we're shot in the head, the bullet ricochets. We have a better chance of living. But It covers us, and it's for two reasons. Number one, it's literally for protection. Whenever you're shooting, even practicing, and we often practiced in it, you get shrapnel. We shoot what they call steel targets. And whenever you shoot steel, the closer you get, the more opportunity that the shell casings that are now disintegrated and in pieces coming back at you, also the steel targets you shoot, that steel breaks off and hits you, in the face often. So if you have that on, you protect. And obviously in a battle, in a fight, you want as much protection as you can from anything, even like a knife coming at you. Maybe it will just get that layer of balaclava, or you're in a fight and you're getting hit. Anything to soften a blow or a punch, a scratch, anything like that. You want full protection. And then also, I think there is some sense of wanting for identification, not to be identified, because often agents are in particular cases and they're shown, their entry styles and so forth. And that same agent might also work undercover. And so there is a sense of identification concealment. But what's important about that was it was purchased. Gosh, I didn't write down the date, but it was purchased. I'll look at it. Because I got to go to the phone in a minute anyway for this summary. It was purchased well in advance of this crime being committed. So now we have the K-bar knife 8 months in advance, and I remember this was also, I think, maybe 10 months. I'll look and I'll get the exact time frame. Well in advance, which shows now it paints a picture of somebody who planned this. They thought about it. They dreamed about it. They fantasized about how it would go. And they were putting together a kit bag for anybody who has ever been involved in investigating cases like this and perpetrators like this. And I'll never forget the first time I had a case where I also got to seize a kit bag they used. It's amazing. They have everything in it. Everything you would think about that you might need. Handcuffs, zip ties, guns, bullets, balaclava, pantyhose, black attire, gloves, multiple kinds of gloves, rope, everything that you could think of that they would need. And we're going to get back to this when we talk about his paper, because there were several things I found very interesting on him describing sort of a crime scene investigator's kit bag. It was so on point. All right. Moving on, where am I at? The Discover card information for Kaylee, they're not going to use it. The DoorDash information from 3:59 a.m. This lists Ethan Chapin and Xana, by the way. We've always talked about Xana, but we're finding out here at 3:59 that they're seizing it for both Ethan and Xana. So it's possible Ethan ordered up something too, because why would I see it here as evidence that they're going to present? Early warning is out, whatever they gleaned from them. Let's see. We have ENS services at 5:26 a.m. They're going to use that video to show Bryan Kohberger's car. So again, remember when we saw some of this footage and it was grainy and it wasn't very crisp. I think as they got more and more surveillance video, which is exactly what we talked about that they would do, that they're going to get better video from some establishments than others. So what you see happening is some of this surveillance videos are not going to be used now, and others are that we had never heard about before. So that's kind of the summation of all of that. Farmer surveillance isn't going to be used. Floyd's tanks I have written, but it might be, I don't know. Ford's tanks, I need to look at it. It says that they are going to be using that at 3:02 a.m. I'll get exactly what that is too. Now I have three things that I didn't write neat enough. We also have finance records that are going to be presented for BK, for Bryan Kohberger. And it's from various institutions, and some institutions, they're not going to use it. So to me, he didn't use those institutions to make purchases for things that were in his kit bag and things that he used either for this crime or for future crimes that he may have planned. But they're going to put together a whole financial dossier. It's going to be completed by Michael Douglas, who is a well-regarded financial forensic expert, and they're going to put it all together. And it's going to paint quite the picture of what Bryan Kohberger was spending his money on. Let me see. Let's see. We have a lot like Indiana Mountain Lake. They're not going to use those records. So again, Joanne Fabrics, they're not going to use those records. Again, these are video surveillance records that I think probably his car was on there, but maybe the quality isn't good enough. All right. We have Deputy Duke's body-worn camera, the BWC. So they're going to use that. So obviously there's something on there. I'm believing that this would be what happened when he initially came on scene at 1122 King Road, but it could be other information, but they're going to use his body-worn camera, and they're letting the defense know. I love this one. They're going to be using the August 21st, 2022 citation. And keep in mind that even though this is what the prosecution is saying they're going to use, it's certainly possible that the defense could motion for these not to be used, and the judge could decide, no, you can't use them. But in each of these line items, by the way, they lay out the law. They particularly list the statute as to why they should be able to use it. And they're going to certainly argue for all of this. This is what they want to prove their case in chief. But that 82122 citation, I'll never forget this when I saw this. And I think some people agreed with me and some people didn't. And I respect all points of views. My view was, this is the argument. He basically goes into the intersection because he's going to turn, like many of us do. So it's on yellow or it's on green, and he tries to hit the yellow light, but because of oncoming traffic, he doesn't turn until it's a red light. And then he makes the turn. So he gets pulled over for running a red light, which is exactly what he did. Now, at the time that happened, I'll never forget, because Cuomo had me on to talk about it. And I said, oh my gosh, this guy, there's so much that comes out in his personality here. He is a fighter. He will lie. He will, and I'll tell you where he lied in this. He said on tape, words to the effect of, we don't have crosswalks where I'm from. Come on. That's just an out and out lie. He's trying to say, because he gets caught scooting into that crosswalk, right, going to make the thing. So you look at that and you say, okay, what is he going to do when he gets caught doing something illegal? Usually people do one of three things. They either say, officer, I'm sorry, give me the ticket, I did it. And they go on their way and pay the $25 ticket. Two, they say, okay, officer, don't want to argue. I'll take the citation. And then they go argue it in court. They get their things together. They and argue it in court. Or they fall on the sword and say, and this is my style, everybody has their own thing they do. They say, oh my gosh, officer, yes, I was in a hurry. I know better than to go into that intersection. I'm so sorry. I hope you can forgive me. I was late to a class and, it's on me. And for me, typically, I usually get a warning if something like that arises. I think as a law enforcement officer, I appreciate it when people are honest. I just want to hear, it's refreshing to hear somebody just be honest, because it's shocking, because there's another group, which is the BK group, that will lie, that will manipulate, that will dig in their heels, that will argue for 30 minutes about a $25 citation. And I don't know how much this one would have been, $40, whatever it was. They will dig in and they will do everything in their power to convince you that you're not right, they're right. They didn't run a red light. They don't have crosswalks. They did nothing wrong. And it was really you, Officer You. He even points that out, basically, your error, something to that degree. I'd have to watch it again. I've watched it many times, but essentially, there are those people. This is Bryan Kohberger. And when people ask me, is he going to plea? Is he going to plea? Is he going to plea? He should plea. He should plea and fight for not getting the death penalty. But I don't think he's going to. Now, could be wrong, because I always caveat that with Bryan or BTK, Dennis Rader. That's one of the people he looked up to. They had very similar styles of a lot of things, being methodical in how they did things again if he committed this crime. And Dennis Rader shocked everybody with a surprise, I'm guilty. And he loved and enjoyed telling everybody about the details. In fact, it was so ridiculous at one point. When I say ridiculous, it went on for so many months, all that they didn't even want to go talk to him anymore because of reveling in him describing all the people he murdered and how he did it and everything. So could he be like that? He could, but he's young. And I really believe he's going to fight this tooth and nail because he really thinks he can get off. He really thinks, just like in that traffic ticket. I don't want to belabor this too much because there's other people that are like, Jen, you're reading way too much into it. It was a traffic ticket. Well, if you don't go with this possible explanation, just look at when he got pulled over in Indiana twice for illegal lane change. It's just his style. It's just who he is. And he may plead guilty. I'm not holding my breath. Let's put it that way. Okay. We're down to item, I think 29. We just did 29, 30. They're not going to use the Marshall's receipt. A lot of people thought he bought clothing at Marshall's that was going to be used. Obviously, they got the information that matched up to that receipt, and it gleaned nothing for them. They are going to introduce the weather on the 12th and the 13th. It's always important to do that for so many reasons. Decomposition of bodies. Also, you're talking about how people might have dressed. You're talking about how blood, how different biological processes and items react under different conditions. I understand they were inside. I get it. And they're going to probably go over that. But it's also important to understand the weather conditions there. All right. They're also going to talk about, let's see, what else are they going to put in? Again, these are bank records from various banks. Numerica Bank, they're not going to put in. PayPal, Bryan Kohberger, they're going to put in his PayPal. So they have found PayPal records that they believe are important. So they're not just looking at bank records. They were very thorough. That's what that tells me. They just didn't stop with bank records. They said, no, we're going to get Venmo, we're going to get PayPal, we're going to get everything. And we're going to make sure that we have everything that would match up to Bryan Kohberger to review. And this is what they've come down to. PNC bank records, they're going to put those in. Again, they're going to be used by Michael Douglas to evaluate. Penny teledata, they've decided not to do that. Pennsylvania Credit Union, they're going to use that against Bryan Kohberger. Petco, that's out. Rite Aid, that's out. Again, I think those are surveillance videos that they found better videos. Ross Financial, that's out. Sunset Mart, that's in. That is line item 40, I believe, and they're going to show that from 3/28. and from 525 and 526. So we not only have before the crime, we're going to get after the crime as well. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I have that time frame right. It looks like also early, yeah, it looks like 525 and 526. There's something important there, which is probably his car being identified. Target, they're not going to use anything from Target. TikTok, they're going to use Xana's TikTok. They're planning on introducing that. Now, I'm going to tell you, I don't understand this unless it's a typo, and I caught a typo. Isn't it funny? I didn't see a typo in Bryan Kohberger's work, but I did see a typo on here. And that was Kaylee Casalvas's initials. I saw they didn't write a G. I believe they wrote a C. And I think that's just a typo. It happens. I write all the time about why people don't catch typos. It's very well documented that people don't catch typos because in your mind, it's what you thought. It's not that you're not thorough, but your mind playing tricks on you. I always post that. There's a big article on it. There's many articles on this, but nevertheless, I don't think that one was caught. And I'm thinking this might have been not caught, but I'm worried. I don't really get it because this is the point. TikTok, Xanacronodal, 3:16 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So Pacific Standard, then there's Mountain, then there's Central, then that is Eastern. That would make it 6 o'clock Eastern, which obviously she was deceased by then. So I'll be interested to see what that means because I was confused when I saw that. I'm thinking, is this a typing error? Is this somehow, I don't know. The only thing I can imagine is a typing error. But I thought that was very interesting. All right. TJ Maxx on Dylan Mortensen. They had gotten those records. They've decided not to use it. T-Mobile records, they're going to use those from both Kaylee and from Dylan Mortensen on November 13th. So again, even though they have much more than this date range wise, this is the most detailed and shrunk down of their evidence that they're going to be using. So, they're trying to be concise, unlike, in my opinion, what happened in the first Karen Reed trial, where they got a little too out there, where it was difficult to really follow the evidence. Okay, moving on. Item number 46. These are the Impaqua records for Dylan Mortensen. And they are not going to use those either. Under Armour transaction records for Bryan Kohberger. They're no longer planning on using that. U.S. Chef Store video surveillance. They are planning on using that. And it's specifically, they're focusing on 12:42 to 12:44 p.m. So again, they're trying to prove that Bryan Kohberger, they're going to have a whole string of these videos to show this is all him. So I appreciate they did that because oftentimes you'll want to prove only up to the crime. And the crime ends and you stop. No, that should never happen. This tells me they really know what they're doing. They're doing the whole from here to here. I hate it when I get those expert cases and I'm like, wait, why did we stop everything? So this is wonderful that they're doing it through the whole time frame. Let me continue on. Let's see. Okay, number 49, there's a snafu between Defense 49 and their 49, so it doesn't exist. Ulta financial records, they're not going to show that anymore. Verizon phone records, they are going to show that. They're going to show them for Ethan Chapin and for, let's see, the other person, for Jack DeCoeur, which of course was Kaylee Gonsalves's boyfriend. And so they're going to grab those and use those as evidence. Item 52, the Walmart surveillance and financial transaction records of Bryan Kohberger. They're not planning on using that anymore. So they believe that they're not going to need that to show their case in chief. 8 more items. Washington Department of Motor Vehicles surveillance video, November 18th, 2022. Yes, of course, they're going to be using that. They've got to link him to that particular car, to those particular plates. And I think they're going to be able to very successfully be able to do that now. Again, Washington Department of Motor Vehicles, the registration documents. So not only do we have the video surveillance documents for him, we also have the registration documents. And you might recall, after this crime took place, he only had one tag because of the difference that is allowed by Pennsylvania versus what is mandated in terms of license tags being front and back in Washington. And you might all recall that he went ahead and, all of a sudden, even though he was very late, decided to get a front and back tag. And I think he, again, was thinking, okay, I did the crime with one tag. Now I'm going to have both tags. I mean, it's kind of rudimentary, but again, he didn't think he was going to be pegged. He didn't think he was going to be caught. So as long as nobody funnels in on you, doing all these things made a lot of sense, assuming you don't think you're going to get caught. This just helps you to have less chance if they don't already have you ID'd from your DNA on the knife sheath you left underneath the body of one of your victims. Let's see. Number 55, Washington Trust Bank records. They're going to have those submitted. So obviously he made purchases using that they're going to want to track back to him. Wells Fargo records for Maddie Mogan. They're not going to be using that. Winco financial records for Bryan Kohberger. They're not going to be using those. Winco financial records and video surveillance for Bethany, Dylan, Xana, Maddie, and I think I said Kaylee. They're not going to be using any of those. 2 more items. Washington State University video surveillance, specifically between 5:28 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. They are going to be showing that. Of course, they got to show him running around Pullman right after. And they're going to be using the WSU, Washington State University, parking records. And again, this is to show that, he drove that car, he parked it there, they have to tie him to that car. All right. So that ends that huge list. I just felt like there was a lot on that list. And for me, I wanted to understand it. And there were a lot of items that really haven't been discussed that hopefully we discussed here. So you don't have any questions as to what they're planning on using. Whew, that took a lot of time to go through. And thank you, Thistle. This'll do nicely. I love thistles, by the way. Anyway, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. I wanted to show you finally this college paper. And I'm going to be on Banfield tonight. I'm really excited because I had joined her and Cuomo, of course, many, many times during the case. And now there's been this huge hiatus. And even though we text each other about a lot of different cases and, kind of run through things, I always enjoy her on her show. She has so much experience and a lot of passion for these cases. And I really appreciate this. She's been in this industry for years. To me, she's kind of like Nancy Grace, crime girl, Banfield was running around doing war, on battlefields. She's been around forever and was really a trailblazer of women in a man's world doing cases. So I appreciate her having me on. But anyway, one of the things we're going to be discussing is this paper. And I've already kind of laid the groundwork for just how thorough it was, how well done it was in every regard, in my opinion. I would love to see what grade he got. I would give him an A on this. It was just great. But I wanted to point out the most important thing I thought that was relevant. And that was, sorry, I'm not on the page I need. I mean, it's so interesting to read. And I'll post it on my Twitter. It's so interesting because he discussed how the knife should be processed, fingerprints, where they should look. One of the other things I thought was interesting is there's different ways you can search a room. I'm not talking about grid searching that you do typically. That's an outside pattern. You don't do that if you're in a room per se. Typically, you do either a strip type search, or you do a wheel type search, or you do a box search. In other words, there's these search techniques that you can do. For me, I preferred box, but not him. He preferred strip, and strip isn't might be what you think. It's actually sort of making a room in strips and searching it that way. So you walk north south, say you choose that, and then you stay in that same strip and go back over it south to north. You do the same thing north south, until you get through all the strips in that room. And the only reason I thought this was interesting is I wondered if when he committed this crime, if he thought about that, and if he thought, listen, it's best that I do not, because he would know this, a lot of people, criminals don't. The more area you're in, the more evidence you're going to leave in more areas, and the more likely somebody is to find that. So if you can stay in your strip, you leave. And he understood Lockhardt's theory that I always talk about. Every time you go to an area, you leave behind part of yourself. And every time you leave an area, you take part of that area with you. So I just was thinking, wow, I mean, he's really thinking how I think anybody in law enforcement would think if they were going to commit a crime. They would think about all these things. And this paper outlines, in my opinion, what he was thinking about and how well he knew the importance of not leaving anything behind. But I want to describe really quick, and this is the last thing. I want to belabor all this too much, but I want to talk about, because I found this fascinating, I want to talk about his kit bag. In other words, not a killer's kit bag, but a crime scene kit bag. So when I was first in the FBI, our evidence teams were much fewer people. It became throughout the years. So I came in 1990, and through the years, the evidence team grew and grew, and they became more organized and received more training. But when I was in for the first 10 years plus, we did our own crime scenes. We had our own evidence kits that we kept stocked. They were in this big brown suitcase looking thing, super wide, not like a briefcase. It was more like a hard-sided suitcase, all leather. It's really cool looking. And we had everything in there. Our plastic bags, we had our cups, we had our measuring tapes, our everything. We had our kits we did our own fingerprints, dusted for fingerprints. I mean, we did it all. But of course, now there's evidence recovery teams that are amazing. That is what they do. It's like they are so well trained and get so much extra training. Why in the world, when they became big, wouldn't anybody call on them to do the work? They love it. They're better trained at it, and they've done it. If I've done it 100 times, they've done it 1,000 times. So anyway, he talks about what they should have, and gosh, he's pretty good. Let me just read it to you. Equipment I will have on hand: 35 millimeter camera that also can videotape, portable lighting system. That is such an important thing he named, and something I thought he would forget. You have to have proper lighting or you're not going to see the evidence well. I'll give you an example. Whenever you see different people look so different, whether they're on television or they're on Zoom, like you're seeing here, they're being streamed in some way, the lighting is critical. If the lighting is bad, you can see terrible lines and wrinkles. People's noses can seem huge. They can seem fatter than they really are. It's all about the lighting. They can look old and haggard versus young and, vivacious. It's all about the more light, the better. And same with when you are videotaping and taking photos of a crime scene, you have to have light to see detail. Even though you're going to take a lot, you still want all those details. So he even talks about that. He talks about the tape measures. He needs them assorted. They need to be at least 25 feet, rulers, other measuring devices, latent fingerprinting equipment, gloves to protect from contamination. And this is critical. He says, this will enable that I avoid leaving my latent fingerprints. And that's so important in law enforcement. I mean, that's the problem with these cases. Oftentimes you have to get everybody normally has prints that's in law enforcement, but everybody and anybody that was in around that crime scene, you have to do all this work to compare when you find a DNA sample or a fingerprint sample that doesn't match up. Could it be the lab technician? Could it be one of the officers or agents that accidentally touched it? And you just cause all sorts of problems. So you have to always, always, always be gloved. I remember early on working with the locals, because for 15 years I was assigned to local departments. And I was such a stickler about gloves. It was like, Jennifer, and I would just, get your gloves on, people. This is 101. Get your gloves on. They're like, all right. But, now everybody is much more understands the real significance and importance always to do it. But I'm telling you, in that Delphi case, you could bet there were people ungloved, 1,000%, that were all over that crime scene, leaving parts of themselves behind. Volunteers, EMS, cops. It was a hot mess. That case will always bother me. Let me move on. Forceps, small tweezers, things like that. He's so correct. You need all that. Saw, different things to take drywall and other cutting utensils to take, things like wood drywall. He doesn't say wood in there. I'm adding that. Filter paper and small swabs for liquid evidence and for trace evidence, paper envelopes for physical evidence, evidence tape to seal the bags, casting material to take molds in case their footprints and fingerprints are there. Absolutely. Magnifying glasses, crime scene tape for the scene itself to make sure that you rope it off and protect that scene. But this is what I found really cool. Protective clothing, boot covers, eyewear, fiber-free overalls. What are we going to think if he ends up having worn fiber-free overalls? Remember, the prosecution wants this paper in. You don't want stuff in that can't help you. I just think it'll be interesting to see. Maybe it won't, but nevertheless, it shows his knowledge. It's amazing. I definitely want the jurors to be able to see this. Fiber-free overalls. Amazing he wrote that in there. Face mask, hair nets. Could his hair have been in a net underneath the balaclava? I bet it was, because I bet he knew he did not want to risk a small, teeny tiny hair although the eyebrow hair could have fallen in that struggle. He didn't want to risk his hair. Gowns, anything that will prevent me from contaminating the scene with things I bring in with me. All right. This paper is 12 pages long. I invite you all to read it. Again, I'm going to post it on my Twitter so you all can read it. But for me, those are the huge highlights I saw. I can't wait to see what you all think. I really appreciate you guys staying on so long. Oh my gosh, I'd never like to go longer than an hour. I apologize. And I'm so sorry I couldn't do Sebastian Rogers today. I just wanted to make sure that I give that case, along with this case, the appropriate attention. And I'm hoping to have that special person come on with me to talk about cold case, what makes a cold case, how does a case become a cold case, how do you know it's a cold case, even though what we have is limited. So I'm really looking forward, or not a cold case, I'm really looking forward to discussing Sebastian Rogers, and also, discussing a new program that they are going to be featured on, meaning all three parents, the stepfather, Chris, Katie, the mother, and of course Seth, are going to be on America's Most Wanted. It's coming up. For those of you who don't know, I'm so grateful that that platform has decided to move forward with a show on them. I think it's critical that his name and face stay out there and the pressure stay on that case so it doesn't become like Summer Wells down the well. So we're going to talk all about that. We'll do that tomorrow. Everybody, I'm sorry to keep you over an hour. I appreciate you. Until next time, and I'll go back through and read these comments when I get off. May justice be served.